There are moments in a human life when the ordinary air seems charged with something invisible yet undeniable, as though eternity itself has leaned closer and whispered into the corridors of time. You may not have heard it with your ears, yet you felt it in the marrow of your bones, a quiet but unyielding assurance. It has been confirmed. Not by rumor, nor by wishful thinking, nor by the fragile optimism that rises and falls with circumstance, but by something far steadier, far older than the mountains and far nearer than your own breath. You have walked through seasons that did not resemble confirmation. You have known nights when the cupboard was thin and the future thinner still. You have watched others receive what you had long prayed for, and wondered whether heaven had misplaced your address. Yet through all of it, there persisted a strange conviction, almost unreasonable in its endurance, that your story was not drifting aimlessly. It was being authored. The phrase "a massive check is on its way" may tempt the mind toward images of ink and paper, of numbers written in bold certainty. But the true magnitude of what approaches you cannot be measured merely in currency. For when the divine confirms a thing, he does not merely send provision, he sends vindication. He does not simply answer need, he reveals purpose. What comes to you carries within it the weight of acknowledgement. You were seen, you were heard, you were never overlooked. Consider how often we mistake delay for denial. We assume that because the door remains shut, there must be no hand upon the handle. Yet what if the waiting itself was preparation? What if your endurance was the very soil in which this promise could take root? A blessing prematurely received can ruin a soul unready to steward it. But a gift delayed until the heart has been tempered by patience becomes not a burden, but a banner of grace. There were trials that felt like subtraction, relationships that dissolved, opportunities that withered, efforts that appeared to bear no fruit. But heaven's arithmetic is not as ours. What seemed like loss was often alignment, what felt like abandonment was frequently protection, and what you called silence was, perhaps, the quiet diligence of unseen hands arranging circumstances beyond your sight. You were chosen not because you were flawless, nor because you possessed some hidden superiority over others, but because grace delights in unlikely vessels. The chosen are rarely those who expected to be. They are often the weary, the overlooked, the ones who continued to trust when logic suggested retreat. In the hidden chambers of your doubt, you wrestled. In the privacy of your prayers, you persisted. That persistence was noted. There is a peculiar fear that accompanies confirmation. When the heart senses that something significant approaches, it trembles, not only with anticipation, but with responsibility. For if it is truly confirmed, then you can no longer hide behind uncertainty. You must prepare. You must enlarge your vision. You must believe beyond the boundaries of former disappointments. The massive check represents more than financial relief. It symbolizes restoration. It speaks of recompense for seasons when you sowed in tears. It whispers of doors opening where walls once stood. It hints at influence expanding beyond your present horizon. And yet, its arrival will not be for spectacle, but for stewardship. What you receive is meant to flow through you as much as it flows to you. Do not mistake confirmation for ease. Often, the announcement of blessing is followed by one final test, a question posed to the soul: do you trust the giver more than the gift? For if your heart clings only to the provision, you will remain as anxious after its arrival as you were before. But if your trust rests in the one who confirmed it, then whether it comes swiftly or slowly, your peace remains intact. You may look around and see no visible sign of what has been declared. The account may not yet reflect it. The letter may not yet have arrived. The call may not yet have come. But the unseen realm is not inactive, simply because it is unseen. Seeds germinate long before green shoots break through soil. Foundations are laid before walls are raised. Confirmation precedes manifestation. The chosen life is not a life exempt from hardship. It is a life infused with meaning, and meaning transforms endurance into expectation. It turns survival into preparation. It shifts your gaze from what is lacking to what is aligning. The confirmation you sensed was not accidental emotion. It was a summons to readiness. So stand differently now, walk differently, speak differently. Not with arrogance, but with assurance. Not with entitlement, but with gratitude. The confirmation was not given to inflate your pride, but to steady your faith. Something substantial is in motion, something that carries the weight of recompense, the fragrance of favor, and the unmistakable signature of divine intentionality. You are not forgotten, you are not disqualified, you are not late. The narrative has not slipped from sovereign hands. The confirmation stands, whether or not circumstances applaud it, and though the world may yet see nothing, the decree has already been issued in realms you cannot measure. There is always a moment before any visible change occurs when everything appears stubbornly the same. The walls do not move, the doors do not open, the silence does not break. And yet beneath that unchanging surface, something irreversible has already begun. This is the moment most people misunderstand, because they have been trained to believe only in what they can confirm with their senses. They trust the evidence of sight more than the assurance of promise. But the chosen life has never depended upon visible evidence. It depends upon a deeper knowing, a certainty that often arrives quietly, without announcement, and settles into the heart long before it ever alters the world. You may have noticed this knowing yourself. It did not arrive with noise or spectacle. It came like a whisper that did not disturb the air, but somehow rearranged your thoughts. It told you, without using words, that your waiting was not wasted. It assured you that what had been delayed was not abandoned. And though nothing around you immediately changed, something within you did. You could no longer believe that your story would end in the narrow place where it had lingered for so long. This inner confirmation not the product of imagination. It does not arise because you forced yourself to hope. In fact, it often appears when hope itself has grown tired. It arrives when you have exhausted your arguments, when you have stopped trying to convince yourself that things will improve, and have simply surrendered to endurance. That is when confirmation becomes possible, because it does not compete with your striving, it replaces it. Many people spend their lives chasing signs, believing that certainty must come from outside themselves. They wait for circumstances to rearrange before they allow themselves to believe. But the chosen are taught a different order. They are given assurance first and manifestation later. This reversal feels unnatural, even uncomfortable, because it asks you to stand on something invisible. It asks you to trust that what has been declared in the unseen carries more authority than what is currently visible in the seen. There is a reason confirmation arrives this way. If the evidence came first, faith would not be necessary. And without faith, the soul would never grow beyond its dependence on circumstance. It would remain fragile, easily shaken by every delay, every obstacle, every apparent contradiction. But when confirmation comes before evidence, it strengthens something deeper. It teaches the heart to remain steady, even when the ground appears uncertain. You may recall how many times you almost gave up. There were moments when continuing felt unreasonable. You questioned whether your persistence had meaning or whether it was merely habit. You wondered if you had misunderstood your purpose, if perhaps the quiet expectation you carried was nothing more than wishful thinking. These questions were not signs of weakness. They were part of the refining. For confirmation does not come to the untested heart. It comes to the one that has endured long enough to recognize its voice. It is important to understand that confirmation does not always remove difficulty immediately. In fact, there are times when difficulty intensifies after confirmation is given. This is not contradiction, it is preparation. The soul must learn to hold its assurance even when circumstances attempt to argue against it. This is how endurance becomes conviction rather than mere survival. There is also a transformation that begins to occur within you once confirmation has taken root. You may not notice it at first, but your posture toward life begins to change. You are less easily shaken by disappointment. You are less desperate for immediate results. You begin to carry yourself with a quiet steadiness that does not depend on outward validation. This is because confirmation has shifted your reference point. You no longer measure your progress solely by what you see. You measure it by what you know has already been declared. Others may not understand this change. They may see no reason for your calm. They may question why you remain steady when nothing appears different. But confirmation was not given to them. It was given to you. It was placed within your keeping, not for display, but for endurance. It is a private assurance that sustains you while the visible world slowly aligns with what has already been determined. There is a temptation in this stage to grow impatient, to demand that manifestation occur quickly, so that your assurance can be justified in the eyes of others. But confirmation was never meant to serve as proof for observers. Its purpose is to anchor you, to ensure that you do not abandon your position in the interval between promise and fulfillment. It is the bridge that carries you across uncertainty, without allowing you to fall into despair. What you must recognize is that confirmation itself is already evidence. Though of a different kind, it is evidence that you have been entrusted with knowledge before its time. It is evidence that your life is not governed solely by visible conditions. It is evidence that something greater than circumstance is at work within your story. And so, even if the outer world remains unchanged for now, you must not mistake stillness for absence. Movement has already begun. Alignment has already been set into motion. What was once uncertain has been settled in a realm beyond your sight. Your task is not to force it into existence, but to remain aligned with what has already been confirmed, to stand in quiet assurance, and to allow what has been declared to arrive in its appointed moment. There is a peculiar refinement that occurs in the life of one who has received confirmation but has not yet seen fulfillment. It is a stretching of the inner life, a widening of the soul's capacity to carry weight without collapsing beneath it. For once assurance has been given, you are no longer merely surviving your circumstances, you are preparing to outgrow them, and preparation is rarely comfortable. It presses against old limitations, it exposes hidden fears. It asks you to release attachments to smaller versions of yourself. You may have noticed that after the certain thank you settled within you, certain things began to feel out of place. Conversations that once held your attention now seem shallow. Environments that once felt familiar now feel restrictive. Even your own patterns of thinking begin to feel too narrow for the horizon you sense approaching. This is not restlessness for its own sake. It is expansion. You cannot step into a larger provision while clinging to a smaller identity. There is a danger in receiving a promise while maintaining the mindset of lack. If your thinking remains shaped by scarcity, you will sabotage abundance when it arrives. You will treat provision as temporary. You will fear its departure before you have even welcomed its presence. That is why the period between confirmation and manifestation is sacred. It is here that your internal architecture is rebuilt. It is here that you learn to think in alignment with what has been declared rather than with what has been experienced. Many people imagine that a great blessing simply drops into a life and instantly improves it. But what they do not see is the inner preparation required to sustain such a blessing. Without that preparation, increase becomes instability. Influence becomes pressure. Opportunity becomes overwhelm. The very thing you prayed for can crush you if your character has not been strengthened to carry it. This is why your recent challenges have not been accidental. They have been instructive. Each delay has trained your patience. Each disappointment has clarified your motives. Each closed door has refined your discernment. What felt like obstruction was often instruction. What felt like resistance was often reinforcement. You were being taught no merely how to receive, but how to steward. There is also a quiet humbling that takes place in this stage. You begin to understand that the blessing approaching you is not a reward for perfection, but a gift entrusted to responsibility. It is not meant to elevate your pride, but to enlarge your purpose. When you recognize this, gratitude replaces entitlement. You no longer demand fulfillment as though it were owed to you. You receive confirmation as a sacred trust. You may feel moments of doubt even now. There are days when the distance between promise and present reality feels wider than ever. In those moments, you are tempted to retreat into old habits of thinking, to convince yourself that perhaps you imagined the confirmation, that perhaps you misunderstood. But doubt does not invalidate confirmation, it tests your allegiance to it. It asks whether you will anchor yourself in what was declared, or drift back toward what is familiar. It is in this tension that true growth occurs, not in the ease of immediate results, but in the discipline of sustained belief. You are learning to hold steady in the unseen. You are learning to let your inner conviction shape your outer posture. This is the kind of growth that cannot be hurried, because it forms the foundation upon which everything else will rest. There is also a refinement of relationships during this time. Some people will not understand your new perspective. They may mock your expectation or caution you against disappointment. Others may quietly distance themselves, uncomfortable with the direction in which you are moving. Do not be alarmed by this. Not everyone is meant to accompany you into the next chapter. Some were companions for a season, not partners in destiny. Yet, there will also be those who recognize the shift in you. They may not know the details of what has been confirmed, but they will sense the steadiness in your spirit. They will notice the calm confidence that no longer depends on immediate proof. These are the ones who are aligned with your growth, who will celebrate not only your arrival, but your preparation. It is important that you guard your inner life carefully during this stage. What has been confirmed is precious. It must not be diluted by constant comparison or careless conversation. Share it wisely, if at all. Let it mature within you. Just as a seed requires darkness before it breaks into light, your confirmation requires privacy before it becomes visible reality. And as you continue in this preparation, remember that the expansion taking place within you is itself evidence of movement. You are not the same person who first received the promise. Your endurance has deepened, your discernment has sharpened, your dependence on visible signs has weakened. These changes are not accidental, they are essential. The blessing that approaches you is not merely about provision, it is about transformation. It is about stepping into a larger expression of who you were always meant to be, and that requires that the old frameworks fall away. It requires that you release the identity formed by limitation and embrace the identity shaped by confirmation. So remain attentive, remain teachable, remain anchored. What is unfolding within you now is as significant as what will soon unfold around you. The preparation is not separate from the promise, it is part of its fulfillment. And as your capacity expands to match what has been declared, you will find that when the manifestation finally arrives, it will not overwhelm you, it will fit. There comes a stage in the journey where the nearness of fulfillment begins to press against your present reality with almost tangible force. It is subtle at first, like the faint light that appears before dawn fully breaks. You cannot yet see the sun, but the darkness no longer feels absolute. Something has shifted, the air feels different, the weight you carried for so long seems lighter, not because your circumstances have changed, but because your spirit has adjusted to a new expectation. This is often the most delicate season, because it requires both restraint and readiness. You sense that what was confirmed is no longer distant. The alignment is tightening. Opportunities begin to hint at themselves. Conversations carry undertones of possibility. Doors that were once immovable no longer seem permanently sealed. And yet, the full manifestation has not arrived. You stand at the threshold. In this threshold season, impatience can become your greatest adversary. After enduring delay and embracing preparation, you may feel entitled to immediate arrival. You may think you have waited long enough, grown enough, endured enough. But thresholds are not crossed by force, they are crossed by timing. And timing, unlike ambition, cannot be hurried. It is here that trust must mature into composure. The soul that once cried out for confirmation must now learn to stand quietly within it. The temptation will be to announce what you sense before it has fully formed, to grasp at partial opportunities out of fear that they may disappear, to mistake preliminary signs for final fulfillment. But discernment is crucial in this hour. Not every open door is the right one. Not every increase is the promised one. You must remember that what was confirmed carries a particular weight, a particular peace. It does not arrive with confusion or desperation. It settles into place with a sense of rightness, even if it stretches you. If something requires you to abandon your integrity, to compromise your growth, or to shrink back into old fears, it is not aligned with what was declared over you. The true fulfillment will resonate with the transformation already taking place within you. There is also a refining of motives in this stage. When you sense that increase is near, you must ask yourself why you desire it. Is it for validation? Is it to silence critics? Is it to prove something to those who doubted you? If so, your foundation is unstable. The blessing approaching you is not a weapon against your past. It is an instrument for your purpose. If your heart is anchored in comparison or revenge, you will mishandle what was meant to elevate you. Instead, let gratitude become your posture. Not gratitude only for what is coming, but for what has been, for the endurance that shaped you, for the discipline that strengthened you, for the hidden growth that no one applauded. Gratitude keeps the heart soft when increase begins to flow. It prevents pride from distorting perspective. It reminds you that what you are about to receive is not solely the product of your effort, but of grace intertwined with obedience. You may also notice that resistance attempts one final surge in this season. Old fears face unexpectedly. Doubts whisper louder than they have in months. Circumstances may briefly appear to contradict what you sense so strongly. This is not evidence that fulfillment is retreating. It is often the final echo of the old season trying to retain its hold. When dawn approaches, darkness does not disappear quietly, it resists the light. Do not interpret this resistance as failure. It is confirmation of proximity. The closer you come to crossing a threshold, the more tension you may feel. But tension is not termination. It is transition. The key is to remain anchored in what you know, rather than in what you feel momentarily. Feelings fluctuate. Confirmation does not. You must also be prepared for responsibility. What approaches you is not simply relief from past hardship, it is an expansion of influence, of stewardship, of expectation. The massive check is not merely financial symbolism, it represents capacity. Capacity to build, to bless, to create, to lead. If you have prayed for increase, you must also embrace accountability, for every gift carries with it an assignment. Ask yourself now, are you ready not only to receive but to manage? Are you prepared to maintain discipline when resources expand? To remain humble when recognition increases? To continue seeking wisdom when doors open easily? Fulfillment will test you differently than delay did. Delay tested your patience. Fulfillment will test your character. There is a sacred steadiness required in this hour. Walk carefully but not fearfully, expectantly but not anxiously. Let your actions reflect preparation rather than desperation. Continue tending to what is already in your hands. Excellence in small things creates credibility for the larger ones. Faithfulness in obscurity prepares you for visibility. Above all, protect your peace. Do not allow the noise of anticipation to disturb the calm that confirmation gave you. The same voice that assured you at the beginning will guide you at the threshold. You are not navigating this transition alone. The alignment unfolding around you is not accidental. It is deliberate. And when the moment finally arrives, when what was once whispered becomes visible, you will recognize it. Not because it dazzles you, but because it fits the shape of the promise that has been forming within you all along. It will not feel foreign, it will feel prepared. As though both you and the blessing have been moving toward each other through unseen corridors of time, destined to meet at precisely the appointed hour. When fulfillment finally steps out of the unseen and into the tangible world of your experience, it rarely arrives with the thunderclap you once imagined. It does not always announce itself with spectacle or trembling ground. Often, it comes quietly, almost gently, as though it has been walking toward you for a very long time and has at last reached your door. And in that moment, you realize something astonishing. The greatest transformation did not occur around you, but within you. For when what was confirmed becomes what is manifested, you are not the same person who first received the promise. The waiting has altered you. The preparation has steadied you. The refinement has humbled you. What once would have overwhelmed you now feels proportionate to your growth. You do not grasp at it with frantic relief. You receive it with mere, assured gratitude. The difference is profound. There is a sacred responsibility in this stage that many fail to recognize. It is far easier to pray for increase than it is to govern it wisely. The arrival of provision, whether in the form of resources, opportunities, recognition, or influence, places you in a new landscape. And landscapes require navigation. What was once simple becomes complex. What was once hidden may become visible. What was once manageable may now require structure and discipline. This is where character reveals its true strength. If humility was cultivated during obscurity, it will guard you in visibility. If integrity was practiced during lack, it will guide you in abundance. But if impatience, pride, or comparison were allowed to linger beneath the surface, they will now attempt to magnify themselves through the very blessing you received. You must remember that fulfillment is not the end of the journey. It is the beginning of stewardship. The massive check was never merely about possession, it was about participation. You have been entrusted with something that extends beyond personal comfort. The increase in your life carries the potential to influence others, to create stability where there was instability, to offer hope where there was despair. If you view it only through the lens of personal gain, you will diminish its purpose. There is also a subtle temptation to relax into complacency once manifestation arrives. After so much striving, so much endurance, so much internal stretching, it feels natural to exhale and settle. And rest is not wrong. Gratitude is not wrong. Celebration is not wrong. But complacency is dangerous. The same diligent that sustained you in waiting must now sustain you in abundance. You may notice that people respond to you differently. Some will celebrate sincerely. Others will appear supportive, but carry hidden envy. A few may resurface from your past, drawn not by reconciliation but by benefit. This is where discernment must remain active. Fulfillment does not remove the need for wisdom, it intensifies it. Not every voice deserves access to your new season. At the same time, guard your heart against suspicion. Do not allow the complexity of influence to harden you. Remain approachable, remain teachable, remain grounded in the same values that anchored you when you had less. The measure of your maturity is not how much you receive, but how faithfully you remain yourself in the receiving. There is also a deeper revelation that unfolds when manifestation becomes reality. You begin to see that the blessing was never solely about the external outcome. It was about intimacy with the one who confirmed it. The waiting forced you into dependence. The uncertainty drew you into trust. The preparation shaped your obedience. And now, even in fulfillment, that relationship remains the true source of your stability. If you anchor your identity in the blessing itself, you will live in quiet fear of losing it. But if you anchor your identity in the one who orchestrated it, you will walk in freedom. Provision may fluctuate. Opportunities may shift. Seasons may change. But the faithfulness that carried you here does not evaporate once the check is cashed. You must also prepare for expansion beyond what you initially envisioned. Fulfillment often reveals that the promise was larger than your interpretation of it. What you thought would satisfy you may instead awaken new vision. New responsibilities may emerge. New paths may open. Do not shrink from this expansion. Growth did not cease at manifestation, it simply changed form. And yet, in all of this movement, never forget the quiet nights when you doubted. The prayers whispered through uncertainty. The discipline maintained when no one applauded. Those memories are not meant to haunt you, they are meant to ground you. They remind you of how far you have come, and of the grace that sustained you when evidence was absent. The chosen life is not defined by a single moment of arrival. It is defined by a continual alignment between confirmation, preparation, threshold, and stewardship. You have crossed into fulfillment, yes, but fulfillment is not a conclusion. It is an invitation to live responsibly, generously, and faithfully with what has been entrusted to you. And as you stand now in the tangible reality of what was once only whispered to your spirit, carry it lightly yet carefully. Celebrate without arrogance, lead without domination, give without fear. The confirmation was true, the manifestation has come, and the measure of your calling will not be seen merely in what you possess, but in how wisely, humbly, and purposefully you allow it to flow through your hands into the wider world that waits beyond you. After fulfillment has settled into your life and stewardship has begun, there comes yet another awakening, one that is quieter, deeper, and far more transformative than the arrival of any visible blessing. It is the realization that the massive check was never the ultimate reward. It was a signpost, a marker along a much larger journey. What you once believed to be the destination now reveals itself as a doorway into greater purpose. There is a subtle shift that happens when gratitude matures into responsibility and responsibility matures into vision. At first you were simply relieved, then you were careful. Now you begin to see beyond yourself. The provision in your hands starts to look less like personal security and more like entrusted potential. You recognize that what has come to you carries the power to alter not only your circumstances, but the trajectory of others. This is where true calling emerges, not in the moment of receiving, but in the decision of what to build. You may have once imagined that once the blessing arrived, peace would simply settle over everything permanently. But peace, in its truest form, is not passive comfort. It is alignment. It is knowing that your resources, your influence, your time, and your energy are moving in harmony with something greater than your own advancement. You begin to ask different questions now. Not how can I secure this, but how can I multiply this wisely? Not how can I protect my gain, but how can I position this for lasting impact? These questions mark the transition from possession to purpose. They reveal that the confirmation you received long ago was never about elevating your status. It was about expanding your assignment. It is in this stage that legacy begins to whisper, not the kind of legacy built on applause or recognition, but the kind woven quietly into lives you may never fully see. You realize that the truest measure of increase is not woe. Hat accumulates around you, but what grows beyond you. And this understanding humbles you more deeply than any season of lack ever could. There is also a refining of ambition. Earlier, ambition may have been fueled by the desire to escape limitation. Then it was shaped by the anticipation of fulfillment. But now, ambition becomes purified. It is no longer driven by comparison or urgency. It becomes a steady commitment to excellence, integrity, and generosity. You work not to prove your worth, but to honor what has been entrusted to you. Yet this stage requires vigilance. Success, if left unchecked, has a quiet seduction. It tempts you to believe that you arrived solely by your own strength. It whispers that you no longer need the disciplines that sustained you in waiting. It suggests that you can now afford to drift. But drift is subtle decay, and decay begins not with dramatic failure but with small neglects. You must guard the habits that formed you, continue in reflection, continue in gratitude, continue in humility. The same posture that carried you through uncertainty must carry you through influence. The moment you assume that the journey has reached its highest point, you risk shrinking the very purpose for which you were prepared. There is also a deeper intimacy available to you now. When you no longer chase provision because it has already arrived, your attention shifts. You begin to value presence over performance. You seek wisdom not merely for gain but for guidance. The relationship that sustained you through confirmation and preparation becomes even more central, for you understand now that the source is greater than the supply. You may also encounter unexpected challenges in this stage. With expansion comes complexity. Decisions carry greater weight. Mistakes have broader consequences. The pressure to maintain what has been built can feel heavier than the pressure to obtain it. But remember, you were not only prepared to receive, you were prepared to lead. The growth that took place within you was not temporary. It equipped you for sustainability. There will be moments when you look back at the earlier seasons and feel astonishment. How fragile you once felt. How uncertain. How close you came to surrendering your expectation. And yet, those very seasons now serve as anchors. They remind you that you are capable of endurance. They remind you that provision can emerge from places that once seemed barren. They remind you that confirmation was faithful then and remains faithful now. The chosen path does not plateau. It unfolds. Each fulfillment reveals a new layer of responsibility, a broader horizon of influence, a deeper call to stewardship. And as you continue walking, you may discover that the greatest blessing was not the check itself, but the transformation of your heart. You have become steadier, wiser, more compassionate, less easily shaken by fluctuation. In the end, what defines this stage is not abundance alone, but alignment. Alignment between what you have and who you are becoming. Alignment between your resources and your values. Alignment between your influence and your integrity. When these remain intact, increase does not corrupt, it amplifies good. So hold what you have with open hands. Build with intention. Give with discernment. Lead with humility. The confirmation that once felt distant has matured into reality, and reality has matured into responsibility. And as you continue forward, you will find that the journey was never about reaching a single moment of arrival, but about becoming the kind of person who can carry blessing without being consumed by it, who can walk in increase without losing dependence, and who can shape the future not merely for personal gain, but for enduring good.